Hi, this is Yanina from Ukraine. What does Ukraine and Russia have in common is our totalitarian past, when we were in Soviet Union. But what we think about it now? So, Ukraine versus Russia. What is the difference? Lenin. The Leninfall versus the Mausoleum. Lenin was the main creator and ideologist of Soviet Union. He legalized violence, organized red terror, publicly called for the mass murder of enemies, and his agricultural policy led to a mass famine. But Lenin is one of the most recognizable symbols of Soviet Union and communism in general. So he more known due to his cult of personality. After his illness and death, the Communist Party began to promote Lenin as an image of morality and revolutionary ideas. There were songs about how young Lenin is, pictures of Lenin with children, numerous Lenin awards, and more than 14,000 of his monuments. What people think about Lenin today? Ukraine. To get rid of the consequences of communist ideology, the Ukrainian government started decommunization. The Communist Party is currently banned. Cities and streets named after communist figures are being renamed. Symbols in public places and monuments are being demolished. And yeah, most of them were monuments of Lenin, like almost in every single town. Before official decommunization, Lenin's monuments were wrecked with great pleasure by average Ukrainians, especially during the Revolution of Dignity in 2013. It was called Leninopad. It's kind of a pun, literally translated as Leninfall. Russia. In Russia, they are openly laughing at Ukrainian decommunization, especially in propaganda media. Lenin's figure is considered positive by Russian society. According to the 2021 poll, 30% of Russians considered him one of the most prominent people of all time. The mausoleum with Lenin's preserved body inside, still on a public display in the center of modern Moscow. And there are lines to see that. And it seems like Lenin still has some impact of decision-making in Russia in 2022.
Must crush capitalism.
Vladimir Putin has justified his ongoing invasion of Ukraine on the basis of bizarre accusations that Ukraine is Lenin's creation and, yeah, at the same time, the homeland of Nazis.
С полным основанием назвать Украина имени Владимира Ильича Ленина. Он ее автор и архитектор. А сейчас благодарные потомки посносили на Украине памятники Ленину. Это у них декоммунизация называется. Вы хотите декоммунизации? Ну что же, нас это вполне устраивает. Но не нужно, что называется, останавливаться на полпути. Мы готовы показать вам, что значит для Украины настоящая декоммунизация.
Stalin, Bloody tyrant versus the greatest leader. What you need to know about one of the key communist leaders. He was building a new industrial economy for future wars by brutally using labor of millions of peasants and prisoners. Stalin is known for his repressions that led to at least 6 million deaths, some historians talking about tens of millions. More than 14 million people were prisoners in Gulag camps. Also, Stalin committed crimes against particular nations, including famine in Ukraine, famine in Kazakhstan, forced deportation of numerous ethnic groups from their homeland. Given the scale, it's hard to find a family in the former Soviet Union that wasn't affected by Stalin's repressions. What do Ukrainians remember Stalin for? like exactly for all I've just told you. He was a bloody tyrant and one of the worst person ever been alive. Stalin built a society of total distrust. People were encouraged to write denunciations of each other, sending each other to death. And all of that was normalized. And for decades it was forbidden to talk about those crimes. What do Russians remember Stalin for? According to a 2021 survey, 56% of Russians agree that Stalin was a great leader. While in Ukraine, 38% of people feel negative emotion to Stalin and another 34% indifferent to him, in Russia, positive attitudes towards Stalin now dominate. It's 59%, and only about 10% feel some bad feelings about him. World War II. As you know, the war began on September 1st, 1939. Nazi and Soviet invaded and divided Poland. The week before, Germany and USSR had signed a non-aggression pact, so basically they were allies. When did the war begin? Ukraine. For Ukraine, the war literally began in 1939, because when Poland was attacked, it includes Western Ukraine. Annexed by communists, Western Ukraine became a part of the rest of Ukraine Soviet Republic, and of course the occupation was called a liberation. And 2 years later, Germany betrayed and attacked its former partner, USSR. That's when Russians think the war was started, in 1941, with aggression from Nazis. They call it the Great Patriotic War and mostly talk about it. It helps to cover up responsibility of Stalin and USSR for the beginning of the bloodiest war in the world history. And it helps to shift the focus on Soviet Union only as a heroic defender, but not as accomplice. According to 2019 poll, only 32% of Russians know that the World War II began in 1939, and 52% thinks it began in 1941, so yeah, they basically just don't know the difference. Another example of manipulation: in Russia you can't compare two totalitarian regimes, USSR with Nazi Germany. Otherwise, you can go to prison for a few weeks. Remembrance versus victory. Since 2015, in Ukraine, we have the Day of Remembrance and Reconciliation and the Victory Day over Nazism in World War II. We are rethinking the events of the war, destroying Soviet historical myths. Instead of Soviet tradition to celebrate, we became honoring. In Russia, the most important holiday is the grand celebration of Victory Days in the Great Patriotic War. While the world say about war, never again, in Russia they say, we can repeat. They have a real cult of victory, with the emphasis of Russians' unique role in winning the war, like they did it alone. It's all about nostalgia for greatness and significance, for a time when the communist totalitarian regime was able to defeat the Nazi Germany, to liberate, but then immediately occupy the all Eastern Europe. Downfall of Soviet Union. Liberation versus the biggest catastrophe. Most of the people who now remember USSR lived there in a time of stable stagnation. There was individual but not mass repression, the consequences of the war were no longer felt. However, it was time of the shortage of basic products and lines that became widespread. With the first appearance of relative freedom of speech and civil liberties, Soviet republics began liberation from the empire, and the totalitarian state collapsed. For Ukraine, as well as Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, Georgia and other former Soviet republics, the downfall of the Soviet Union equal independence, free society and our own sovereign state. For us, the USSR is a cruel, totalitarian past, tragic and traumatic experience that need to be rethought. Through the study of the real, not propaganda history, open dialogue, psychotherapy, etc. The most accurate attitude of modern Russia to the USSR was expressed by Putin himself in 2005, when he said that the downfall of the USSR was the greatest geopolitical catastrophe of the 20th century. 2021 polls confirms that Russians have positive association with the Soviet Union. Every fifth Russian remembered stability and confidence in the future. 13% said about nostalgia, 11% about memories of childhood, and only 1% of respondents have associations such as repression, execution, and the Gulag. For Russia, as the center of the USSR, this was a period of your country's success, with great leaders, heroic victories, and the idea of the most powerful country in the world. And now we see that they want to return to this delusion. The consequences. So, the ongoing Russian war against Ukraine isn't something brand new. That's what happened when for decades you normalized a totalitarian worldview. And this ideology is spread not only in politics, but in education, culture, literature, music, and so on. Even a person who disagrees with it still exposed to destructive effects from such an environment. The world now is horrified and confused. How modern Russia could be a country that commits rapes, murders against 1,000 of civilians, purposely destroys cities? However, there was no real moral responsibility for the crimes of Soviet regime. Modern Russians do not recognize and do not analyze what exactly happened then, and in particular, it happened to the Russians themselves and their ancestors. Social and individual traumas of people are encouraged by old and new propaganda and create a deeply sick society which now repeats the old crimes. Unpunished evil grows.